Let's unpack this recent treasure hunt design. It was a 48-hour treasure hunt that was launched during the 2026 Super Bowl. This is the Redfin Rocket Mortgage Treasure Hunt. And this is a fascinating one. I am intrigued with these modern treasure hunt designs. There are so many of them that are popping up in different environments in our culture. It's definitely a cultural movement. Now, there are a lot of versions of this that have been growing over the last 10, 15, 20 years, especially the last 15 years. And I want to talk through the features of this design because we can learn a lot from it. If you are a person who watches my channel because you get into problem solving and decision making and trying to discover those literal and metaphorical treasures, well, I think you'll get a little bit out of this. If you're also just intrigued with this cultural movement, you want to unpack it together, well, that's what we're going to do. So I have broken this down into basically 12 categories. A while back, I created a video on 12 features of well-designed treasure hunts, and I'm going to use those features to walk through this recent treasure hunt, the Redfin Rocket Mortgage Treasure Hunt. So the first feature is a theme. Now, not every treasure hunt has a really strong narrative or story or theme behind it, but most of the well-designed ones and memorable ones do have some kind of story or some kind of theme. What was the story or the theme of this one? Well, the title, I believe, of the commercial, if you look it up, is America Needs Neighbors Like You. It's this really nostalgic aesthetic, and it's powerful. It actually uses the song from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Won't You Be My Neighbor, which immediately is triggering childhood memories of home, both the good and the bad of it for a couple of generations of people. And it's being sung by Lady Gaga, and she sings a really emotional, powerful version of it. And then the commercial itself has about 3 stories layered within it of people moving to new locations, of the uncertainty, of the fear. There's even a kind of subtle message of people not being very welcoming and how to break down those barriers. So in the commercial, 3 very quick, 60-second commercial, but 3 very quick stories. They take you through the lives of 3 different people, essentially, and it draws you in really quickly. It's a powerful and emotional commercial for many people. It's tapping into loss and moving away and leaving friends and families that may be breaking up and new starts and trying to break down racial and ethnic barriers. It's all packed in there in this really tight element. And that is actually the way that they draw you in to the treasure hunt in a sense as well. Now, the treasure hunt itself is actually not that narrative, but the story that they tell to hook you into the commercial and the story they tell to kind of launch the treasure hunt, that's what it is. So they're trying to paint the picture that this is not really about a house, this is about home. And this is about neighbors and about neighborhoods. Because this treasure hunt is all about a 48-hour treasure hunt, and the winner gets $1 million home. But you have to go through some certain steps in order to have a chance to win this treasure that is the house. So the first part, again, is it starts with a theme. America Needs a Neighbor, very nostalgic. The second part then is when you're looking at the features of a treasure hunt, is you need to determine the treasure, the physical listing. Well, in this case, as I just mentioned, the treasure is a $1.7 million prize, or it was. This treasure hunt is now concluded. But it was about $1 million home and then another $700,000 to account for taxes and other things like that associated with the home. So it's a very nice prize. The third thing is to set a time frame. Now, as I mentioned in my prior video about treasure hunt design, the time frame can be open-ended and it can be until the treasure is discovered. So there are treasure hunts that have been going on for decades and the same treasure hunt is still happening. There are treasure hunts that happen for years, for months, for weeks, for days, for hours, and even for minutes. In this case, they set a very specific time frame, 48 hours. And you can understand this because the decisions of a treasure hunt design tied to the purpose of a treasure hunt. And in this case, this is a marketing-driven treasure hunt. They want people to download the Redfin app and to start to use it to search for homes. They want customers. And they're going to have a blast of attention where they want to get a lot of attention, a lot of marketing buzz in a very narrow time period to get as many people as possible to download that app and to start using it and to get familiar with the features. So not only is this getting people to download the app so they're more likely to use it when they search for a home, because they're probably trying to compete with one or two of the other big players in the real estate app market and the real estate platform website market. But the other thing is when you step into a new app, sometimes it gets frustrating because you don't know how to use the app. You don't know how to use the different search tools in order to make good use of it. You get frustrated quickly and then you delete it. It could very well be that Redfin was discovering that people would download their app, but then they didn't seem to stick with it. So what if you could design a treasure hunt that along the way is actually introducing people to the very features that would be necessary for them to keep that app on their phone or on their device long term. So they set a 48-hour sprint, launched during the Super Bowl, but it was actually announced before the Super Bowl. So we find a couple of different places. They started touching base with different news outlets, and they were sponsoring different activities and events leading up to the Super Bowl. So people were already primed with the fact that Redfin was going to be releasing a treasure hunt during the Super Bowl. So people were already aware of it and they're going to be looking for it. They started drawing people into the treasure hunt even before it was launched. And obviously you need to do that if it's a time-sensitive treasure hunt. If it's only 48 hours, you don't want to waste the first 24 hours just getting the attention of people to participate. They want to get as many people participating in this treasure hunt in the first minutes that it's launched as possible, and then they'll be launching it from there. So their strategy was getting the buzz out to a larger group of people, and they did that in a variety of ways. Then we get to the fourth feature. So define the play area. Now this is an interesting one because the play area can be defined in a couple of ways. When you're designing a treasure hunt, you can pick that the treasure is hidden somewhere, anywhere in the world, anywhere in a certain country, anywhere in a particular state, city, region, even a specific room or portion of a room. You can narrow it down. Well, in this case, the treasure hunt was broken up in two ways because the house itself, which you had to find essentially at the end in order to win the treasure, that was somewhere in the United States. So in that way, it was bound to the United States. But the actual treasure hunt itself had more specific areas. It turns out that the commercial itself was the place where all of the clues reside. Now the clues, there are riddles attached to the clues, but the raw clues were hidden in plain sight within that 60-second commercial that was released during the Super Bowl. So you have the fact that the treasure itself is somewhere within the United States. You know that the clues themselves are going to be hidden within this commercial. They're all hidden within this commercial. That becomes apparent over time. And then the app is the place where you will participate in the game. So in that sense are really three locations of sorts. United States for the house, the commercial holds the raw clues, and the app itself is the place where you go to play the game. So they've defined it that way. Pretty simple. I know it sounds a little bit more complex when I break it down into those three pieces, but a pretty simple design platform. And again, it makes a lot of sense because part of the purpose of this game is to get you using the app. So why not have the game operate within the app? All right, so let's go ahead and dive in then to the next part. So we've defined the play area in three ways. Then the fifth part is build the clue chain. This is where treasure hunt puzzle designs can be quite different, the way that clues are used. Sometimes clues are designed in a very sequential way where you solve one clue or a riddle and there's a clue, and within that is the clue to the next clue and so forth. And in other cases, the clues are maybe chronological or they're in a particular order, but they're not necessarily tied to one another. Maybe they're tied to the overall theme in some kind of broad way. They're not necessarily tightly connected to one another. There are a lot of different ways that clues can be used. So I'm not going to go into explaining that over again in this video, but if you want to go back and check my older video on treasure hunt design, I even have another video somewhere on this channel about different types of clues. You can check those out if you want to geek out about that a little bit more. But building the clue chain, in this case, there's a linear chain of 6 clues. You solve one clue to see the riddle for the next. But the idea then is there are clues within the commercial in this game, and then you go to the app to participate, and the app has these 6 locks that are the 6 different clues, and you have a riddle or some kind of hint associated with the first clue when it's open, and then you try to solve it. And once you get the code word or whatever it is in there, for example, in this one, the first answer was Denver, and when you type that in, it indicated to the player that it was solved, but the next clue doesn't release instantly, because what they did in this one is they wanted to spread it out over the 48 hours or over a portion of the 48 hours. So you would solve the first one, but if you solved it before a certain time frame, you'd have to wait. There was a timer, and you'd have to wait for the next one to be released. So then the 6th step is about writing the actual clues. In this case, there's a riddle and visual pairing. So in the commercial, there are these clues that are hidden in the background of different scenes. Like there's a bird in the background in one place, there's a number on a real estate sign, there is a bag, a shopping bag with some clues on it. And so there are different places within the commercial at different times. You have these clues, but they don't necessarily mean anything when you're watching it. They just seem peripheral. But then when you start the game and you're in the app, there's a clue about something like shop name, or I forget the exact words. I didn't write down the exact clues that were listed in the app, but there was a riddle or a statement, and then you'd have to go back to the advertisement to look through it to find a clue subtly hidden in the background that related to the hint, and then you would be able to type in or enter a answer, at least for the first one. In other cases, you had to use some other features within the app. Now, the way this one was set up, again, is you have a series of 6 clues. They're locked, and then you have to solve one before the next one is unlocked, and it has to be at a certain time frame in that 48-hour period. So there are 6 of these, and they're loosely connected. They're all tied to the idea of the house. So the theme of the house in one way or another. The answer to one of the clues was Denver, and then you had to draw a circle around these 4 corners on the map. You had to filter down to Colorado, learning how to use the features. You had to narrow it down to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath house because there were some clues leading to that. And then there was a bike score for a certain neighborhood, a bike score of 60. So you get the idea, and you would narrow down. Now, the last clue, though, was the most controversial one, because the clue was something like head in the clouds. And if you go back to the commercial, the way to solve that one was actually the shapes of the lightning bolts in the sky during a storm that was displayed. I won't get into the details, but that was leading to the estimated square footage, because the shapes were supposed to be hinting toward a couple of mountain peaks, and that was supposed to get you to the estimated square footage of 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. And that one, I've even seen that there's a little controversy. Sometimes when people play these games, they get pretty annoyed whenever they feel like the riddle was not fair or it wasn't clear enough. Well, it's a treasure hunt, people. It's supposed to be a little bit unclear. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to have some stretches sometimes in finding the answers and all. But it was a really interesting and simple design when you really think about it. And this is a kind of thing that any of us can design, and I hope that you do. And I hope to see more of these treasure hunts. They are fun and enriching, and they help us to learn how to think more clearly and to notice things that we'd miss otherwise. Okay, the 7th one is establish the rules. The rules were really simple. You have to download the app in order to play. You click on a certain button in order to get into the portion of the app where the game is working. You have 6 clues you have to solve. There's a 48-hour period. All the rules are laid out pretty clearly in this game, and they're even described in advance of the game. And that's actually not always the case. With a lot of treasure hunts, they don't tell you all of the rules of the game. They give you some broad parameters. But in this game, it was narrowed down quite a bit from the beginning, and that's necessary because remember, again, it's only a 48-hour treasure hunt. So you have to narrow it down if you really want this to work. And then we're going to go on then to the 8th one, plan the game master role. Now in this case, it's kind of interesting because the person who is involved in the design of this game is Trevor Rainbolt. And if you don't know the geoguessing world, you've maybe never heard of him. If you do know the geoguessing world, you've heard of him. So geoguessing is a trend that developed, 15 years ago or so? As Google Earth and Google Maps were developing, people started to realize they could turn this into a game where you'd have a screenshot or a section somewhere, you get dropped somewhere in the world, and you were stationary and you could move around in Google Earth or Google Maps and just see this one area, and you had to guess where you were located. And this turned into a whole new game genre, a geography game genre. It's fascinating where people will learn about the different kinds of telephone poles and electric poles in various countries in order to pay close attention. They learn about the flora and the fauna and other kinds of nuances that would give them clues to where they're located by looking at a simple image. So here's the thing that's fascinating. It was actually announced that Rainbolt was part of the design of this game before it even released. And he's known as a geoguesser, so it was already telling you before the game started, there is going to be some element of geoguessing in this. There will be some element of looking at images very closely and noticing nuances that others would miss, looking in the background, looking for small things that give you a clue or a hint. Now, it wasn't a traditional geoguessing game. There were symbols and clues that were hidden in the background and the images in the commercial, but then it flipped to a more traditional treasure hunt style with riddles and clues. That's not a common feature of geoguessing. But the fact that Rainbolt was involved, I mean, he's a guy with 2 YouTube channels, a couple million on one channel, 1 million on another. I think he has a couple million on TikTok, maybe that many on Instagram as well. So he's a figure who's known, and he started dropping some hints and clues early on. He played a little bit of an active, involved role in the game. He was sort of public a little bit during the game, I understand, but I didn't actually see that for myself. I was just reading about it a little bit. So that's a fascinating part of this, that he was a partner with them for this. They tapped right into an existing gaming culture to prime this and make sure that it doesn't fail. If you have a bunch of geoguessers that are participating because he's pointing them to it, then you're going to get some clues starting to be dropped, and it'll make it an interesting game. And then we get to the 9th feature of game design, create the invitation. That is very clear. The invitation was super clear. QR code right there in the commercial. Invitation to join this game even started before the commercial was launched. So a very, very clear invitation, unlike some treasure hunts where it's very subtle and the invitation slowly goes out to the world. Because it's a 48-hour treasure hunt, they had to get it out right away, and they did. And the 10th feature is plan the conclusion. Automatic termination. The game ends the second that the final answer is given, and it's narrowed down to these 25 houses, and you pick the right one, and the first one to pick wins. So it's at the end of this 48 hours. They wanted it to last 48 hours, and they managed to do it that way. Very clear conclusion. When the first person finds the house, you're basically at the end of the game. And then the 11th feature is running the hunt. In this case, again, there's a staggered release of clues within a 48-hour time period. And the last one, the last measure of a good treasure hunt design is success metrics. So in this case, they want people to increase their literacy of how to use the Redfin app, and they want more downloads. I don't have access to those data, but I can guarantee you it was a successful treasure hunt from their perspective. They got a lot of people downloading, and I'm guessing that a lot of those people learned to use the app enough that they would start to explore and browse and maybe even use Redfin to purchase their next house, and maybe use Rocket Mortgage for their mortgage to buy that house. So there's my breakdown for you. I hope you find this interesting. I really think there's a lot of value in unpacking these kinds of treasure hunts and understanding that it is a clear design. There are design features to it. There is a logic to it. And the more you understand that there is a logic and an order to treasure hunts, the better you can be a designer and a participant in them, and the better you can understand them. And this is a beautiful example of how understanding the intent of the treasure hunt, understanding some of the features, and understanding the architect or one of the designers behind it can give you a heads up on how to better solve it. Now, as I say often on my channel oftentimes delves into the world of treasure hunts and game design and so forth. But ultimately, my goal on this channel is for us to have some fun, but to also cultivate habits of clear thinking and to be better at problem solving and decision making and so forth. And that's why I'm ultimately interested in this, because I believe that this emerging and continually growing culture around treasure hunts and these types of thinking games, it's really good for people. I think it's actually one of the healthier cultural movements that we've seen in the last 15 years. It can be social, you interact with other people, so it's not just isolated, it gets your mind working, it can help cultivate paying better attention, it can help cultivate good habits of thinking, it helps you better understand your strengths and your limitations and how to build the strengths and how to downplay and push away some of those limitations. So I hope you find this useful. I look forward to your comments.